Jesus doesn't mind our questions. But what if this is made up? I want to know, okay, in Jesus' life, more than just recorded here, did the events happen as what's recorded here? Did they happen? And I was surprised to find that there's multitude. There's a number, and I'll give you some names, but there's a number of non-biblical accounts of the life and ministry of Jesus. And this is what I was looking for. I was looking for, okay, I need to know if Jesus made this kind of mark more than just what the Bible said. Historians should have recorded the same events, because these are peculiar events, don't you think? Historians should have recorded Jesus and some of his followers and some of these events that happened around his life. Here's a list. I'll give you a list of what these non-biblical historians agreed on and recorded about Jesus and his followers. This is some of the things they said and they agreed on, historically written. In fact, there's more evidence through historical documents that Jesus lived in the time in which they said he lived than any other historical figure in that time. There's more written about Jesus. So people like saying, well, Jesus is made up and he never really lived. Study. If you're a skeptic, and you should be, take some of these names down, study them, find out for yourself what they wrote. But I'll just summarize what they wrote. Non-Bible, not Bible, what historians wrote about Jesus. Some of the things they wrote is that Jesus lived in Judea, an actual geographical location that still exists today. That Jesus lived in Judea, okay? That Jesus lived around AD 0, the year AD 0 to 33, okay, is the next one. Okay, that Jesus was born Jewish. Okay, that Jesus was an esteemed teacher. These are historical accounts. Okay, that Jesus' teachings were considered honorable. Okay, this is written by Jewish historians, Roman historians that didn't necessarily believe in Jesus, but they considered his teachings honorable. That Jesus had a reputation for displaying godlike abilities or performing miracles. Again, written aside from Bible. Okay, that Jesus' followers worshiped him as God. Okay, they record this. That Jesus interacted with another well-documented historical figure, Pontius Pilate. Okay, that Jesus was crucified in the way that the Bible records him crucified near Jerusalem. That also historically they record that there was an earthquake and a period of darkness, possibly caused by a solar eclipse or a volcanic eruption, darkening the sky with ash about the time of Jesus' crucifixion. Okay, and they also record that Jesus' followers claimed he rose from the dead. Okay, and they also record that the disappearance of Jesus' body following his very public crucifixion caused an uproar in the ancient world. And then they also recorded that Jesus' followers then began spreading his teachings and that the movement multiplied, not got squashed. These are historical records aside from the Bible. I'll give you an example. Josephus, the Jewish historian that I told you about. This is what Josephus wrote about Jesus. He said this: at this time, there was a wise man who was called Jesus. His conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous, and many people from among the Jews and the other nations became his disciples. Then he goes on and he says, Pilate condemned him to be crucified and to die. But those who had become his disciples did not abandon his discipleship. They reported that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion, that he was alive. And then it says, accordingly, he was perhaps, this is a Jewish historian who would have known the law. He was perhaps the Messiah concerning who the prophets have recounted wonders. It's amazing. Josephus, as far as we know, never became a Christian, never became a believer. And you look at that and going, well, then how he recorded all the events. How did he not become a believer? The truth is Paul lived in the same time, saw all these events, heard about these events, was being trained by the Pharisees, the very Pharisees that accused Jesus of being a liar. And Paul, witnessing many of these events, did not become a believer right away either. Right? Just because they saw and witnessed with their own eyes, they didn't necessarily become a believer right away. And Paul was not moved at first by the claims of Jesus' disciples that he had risen from the dead. In fact, Paul actively attempted to stop this movement and to silence them. And Paul was as recorded as actually persecuting some of the early Christians and the disciples. And that Paul was, it records in the book of Acts that Paul was standing there when Stephen was martyred, where Stephen was first killed, one of the believers was first killed. Paul was standing there giving approval of Stephen being martyred and killed. And yet this same Paul later went on to write these words in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 14. This is amazing to me. He says this, "And if Christ has not been raised from the dead, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith." Wow. What's wow about that is Paul literally went on to, Paul's basically saying, if it wasn't for Jesus, and it wasn't in particular for his resurrection, then our faith is useless. To which you'd say, no, Paul, you've believed in God. Your entire life, you believed in God. You followed God. You were obedient to God. How can you say, you're saying, Paul, that without Jesus, your entire life was worthless, like pointless, that your faith before all this was pointless? And Paul's saying, absolutely. It's the resurrection. It's Jesus that makes all the difference.